Welcome to day 96. A funny thing happened on the way to day 96 in that on day 95, if you watched it, it was a long one. I gave like a very, for me, in-depth sort of analysis, not on the script itself, the first 10 pages, 11 pages, but more on my process of writing, my thoughts, what I mean to convey by different lines of dialogue and all the kinds of stuff. And I said, well, I'm pretty much done. I'm going to send it out to some people and I don't know what they're going to say about it. And so probably mistakenly, I talked about it as if more than likely I wasn't going to make changes, which in retrospect was kind of silly because when you send it out to your peers or anyone, a coverage person or something, you're going to get notes. And if you value the person's input, you're going to probably make some changes based on those notes. And guess what? I did. I did send it out to two people. One of the people has gotten back as of this day 96 and some very insightful stuff, just incredibly helpful. I won't name names because she may not want me to. So what we're about to see on day 96 is the culmination, and this will just be kind of day 96 is part one of me making some adjustments based on what she said. So let's get started. So I think these few little changes are based on something about not using the word chaperone. Maybe not. This may sound totally random. All right. So now I'm on to the changes that she suggested. And one of them was that instead of bedroom, I said house. And then she said, wouldn't it be more interesting if instead of two stuffed animals, she either had none or she had a whole bunch of them? So I thought about that and I thought and I wrote, and then as sometimes happens, you rethink and you go back and you rewrite. So I'm still deciding if we really want a whole pile of them, if she's surrounded by them, because that would give maybe some indication of, if the family was rich or poor. Maybe not. I don't know. I may be overthinking that. So as it's rewritten now, she suggested, because she has a granddaughter, that maybe it was just a whole bunch of them. And one of the reasons she talked about this is because she thought, and it's ironic, she goes, have you read Save the Cat? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's sitting right here and Save the Cat Strikes Back. And she didn't feel like Holly had a Save the Cat moment, which Blake Snyder defines as the hero doing something good, not really in the grand scheme of things, but just something in his or her current experience that will get the audience on his or her side. And so that's what this thing with the stuffed animals is leading up to. The other thing she said is to put more meaning behind some very minor words. Instead of the van drives off, does it coast off because they're trying to be quiet? And so now I'm figuring out maybe that makes more sense. So she kind of coasts away, then the engine turns on, turns over, and they drive off. And just a lot of her suggestions seemed really nitpicky, but in a very good way, because they made me realize that I needed to pay more attention to just the little things. Because overall, she didn't have many notes. She had a few story notes and then several on what I just described as the nitpicky stuff, but I mean, very, very good notes. And I'm like, wow, I never really even thought of that. And that becomes apparent again, when you've written it and then you've read it so many times, which is why you need the whole fresh eyes thing. So even like Holly's line, who are you? You're Aunt Holly. She said, that doesn't sound right. How about just I'm Aunt Holly, which is probably a little more warm and friendly. And so now this is the Save the Cat moment I'm trying to work on. So she suggested, instead of something mundane like I like ice cream, because as she pointed out, all little kids like ice cream. So she said, what if it was just some totally random factoid about, I collect pet rocks, or no, she didn't give that example. And so I said, well, what about something like that? And Holly would hear it and say, that's interesting. But then when I thought about it more, I realized, I don't know how, it's one of those weird things. It just sort of came to me that I could really have something interesting here. So here we go. She looks at the hand in front of her, starts to put out one of her own to shake. All right, so bingo. I wish I had more time, but I have my rule that I can't stop. And so what Lexi, from her experience, even at 4, she knows that a handshake means a promise. So when Holly puts out her hand to her, she's basically promising her that, yes, it will be okay. And Holly is sort of, well, yeah, sure does, figuring out she's only 4. So for Lexi, Holly has just made a promise that this will be okay, meaning whatever's going to happen. And Holly has agreed to it by shaking her hand and then confirming it. So I thought that was kind of cool. And also, I guess I've already passed it by, but the save the cat moment. Okay, hold on. I'm doing it right now, it looks like. All right, so I'm going to add a little bit to this. So this is kind of the save the cat moment that we kind of discussed when I talked to this person about the notes, but then I actually did some work on it and tried to get it just right, which of course, who knows if anything's ever just right. So I'm thinking, Holly hasn't, she smiled, she shook the girl's hand, but she hasn't really done anything save the cat-ish yet. And so I thought, well, maybe Holly brought a couple stuffed animals with her, and so she gets it out and, showing her soft side, gives it to the girl, or tucks it under her head and makes it into a pillow. But then after I wrote this, yeah, there we go. I'm trying to figure out exactly what Lexi would say and how it would really play out and make sense that Holly would, sort of, make the right move at the right time. So then I realized maybe Lexi could just say what she says there, and Holly answering her with the knowledge that she's got her stuffed animals and she's going to give them to her. So hopefully that kind of endears the audience to Holly a little bit. And maybe they already are, maybe they're not. And again, if the actress who's going to play her plays her, then the dynamics could change anyways. Because some people are obviously just more inherently likable or not. So I don't know. I haven't seen any comments in the ones I've actually put on YouTube so far, but I'd love to hear comments if this feels like a save the camp moment, if you think it's a good change. I really like it. I like both the handshake and, that makes it a promise. And I like the fact that Holly has the save the camp moment. So thank you. And then that super 14 years later, which I added a few minutes ago, she thought, again, and I've talked about it a lot, and I kind of ignored my own rule of anything that slows the read down is not good. And so what she said is that, Holly later 30, so we don't know exactly how old she is, which means we don't know how much time has passed. So she said, why don't you just make that obvious? And then she said, instead of Luke just hitting the ball over or something, make it, more descriptive, show some character in an action that someone does, show some purpose behind it. Okay. So here's the payoff. Payoff A. We'll talk about it on the drive up. And this to me says, well, Lexi's thinking back to her childhood. She puts out her hand as in, do you promise that we're going to talk about it on the way up? And then instead of shaking her hand, Holly says 8 o'clock sharp. To me, and I'm probably thinking way too much into it, that is pretty cool, which is another reason, again, even though this person didn't give me the note to do exactly that, she said, this, you need to do something there. And that's where writing can be awesome, when you go back and you take something you think was pretty good and you make it better, and then obviously better and better and better, at least in your own mind. And so when someone else reads this, they'll obviously, he or she won't know what it was before. And so hopefully the change, I don't know how I want to say that, not knowing what came before, it won't be a change to them. It'll just be, oh, that's the story. And hopefully that's good. Very small thing you just saw. She wanted to make sure it was clear it was a go-kart track. So I played with that. So this is another one that she thought, this was a kind of a pretty major note she had. She felt that this racetrack scene, while well written, she didn't say that, but she thought it needed some work because she didn't feel like much happened. She didn't really learn much. So I didn't do it today, but I got to that scene. So my challenge for day 97 is to see what can be done about that. Tune in again. Thanks again for watching Screenwriter's Journey.